Next, we'll hear from the co-chair of this hearing, the chairman emeritus of the full committee and the chairwoman of the Middle East and North Africa Committee, Ileana Ros-Lehtinen.
Thank you so much, Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Bass. Thank you for your passionate words and for your longtime leadership on this important issue. You, Mr. Smith, have been a vocal and steadfast ally for all those who suffer and are denied their basic and fundamental rights, especially those who are targeted for persecution and harassment because of their religious beliefs. We on this committee have had several hearings focusing on religious minorities in the Middle East and on the humanitarian crisis in Syria and now in Iraq. Last September, Mr. Smith, I remember you remarked in your opening statement about how the Christians are not dying because they are in the war or as collateral damage. No, their communities are being deliberately targeted. And it is important to remember that the Christian communities in Syria, as well as in Iraq, are both ancient communities that have long had their roots in the region and even predate Islam by several centuries. But as we have seen, these communities are quickly dwindling in number as they face the ISIL threat in Iraq and in Syria. These vulnerable populations are taking the brunt of the unending humanitarian crisis in Syria as Assad, ISIL, and other rebel groups and the opposition all continue to struggle for supremacy. Just 10 years ago, the Christian population in Iraq numbered 1.5 million people. And before Assad began his campaign to quell calls for reform and democracy with military force and upended the entire country, Christians numbered close to 2 million in Syria. Today, after 3.5 years of brutality and unending violence, about 1/3 of Syria's Christians have been forced to flee their centuries-old homes, with many having been beaten, tortured, forced to convert, or murdered. Their churches have been destroyed, their homes robbed, their children raped or kidnapped. And the plight of Iraq's Christians is just as bad, if not worse. There are now less than 400,000 Christians in Iraq. Many face the same fate as those in Syria, forced to flee, convert, or be killed. Tens of thousands, if not more, have fled to Erbil to seek refuge in Kurdistan away from the ISIL scourge. What was once Iraq's most populated Christian town is now down to just a few dozen. And this is not something new. The persecution of Christians, and in fact, many other religious minorities in the Middle East and North Africa and elsewhere, has been rampant and prevalent for years. But it took the threat of the extinction of the Yazidis in Iraq just a few weeks ago for the administration to finally take any meaningful action in defense of a persecuted religious minority in Iraq or Syria. It was certainly the right thing to do, but my question is, why did it take so long for the administration to wake up to the realization that it isn't just the Yazidis who are being targeted for extinction by these radical and fundamental Islamist ideologues, but it is Christians too who have suffered greatly? This is not a political issue, Mr. Chairman. This is about right and wrong, about a belief in our ideals and our morals, that everyone, everywhere, that is about justice, that is about freedom of religion, everyone should be able to live freely and openly without fear of persecution and be able to practice their faith. When President Obama spoke to the American people about his decision to intervene in Libya, he said, quote, "Some nations may be able to turn a blind eye to atrocities in other countries. The United States of America is different. And as president, I refuse to wait for the images of slaughter and mass graves before taking action," end quote. But where has that leadership been in Syria and Iraq? Why have we allowed the Christians to be persecuted and murdered to the brink of extinction without taking action? Taking action against ISIL is an important step further, but leaving Assad in power will not fix the problem because he is part of the problem. Now we are left with even more difficult decisions than ever, and we cannot, for the sake of the Christian communities in Iraq and Syria and the other religious and ethnic minorities in the region, dither and remain indecisive or non-committal any longer. These crises are not new, and we on this committee have been highlighting them for years now. The administration has had plenty of time to hash out a clear set of objectives and map out a strategy. And it is way past time that the President presented that to the American people, to those who need our assistance, and to those who seek to harm us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Bass, for this joint hearing.